The blistering midday heat gave way to a refreshing coolness. Dark, heavy clouds rolled in from the west, blanketing the sky in shades of grey. A sense of expectation hung in the air as distant thunder murmured, hinting at the coming rain. The townsfolk, with mixed feelings of worry and excitement, cast quick glances at the brooding sky while rushing to complete their outdoor tasks. Rain was on the brink of pouring down. Amidst this, young Taylor continued her chores in the yard, seemingly oblivious to the brewing storm. "Taylor, why aren't you heading home?" yelled her neighbor, Stephen, an elderly gentleman. "Look at the sky. It's dark, and lightning's already flashing." Suddenly, a loud crack of thunder, accompanied by a bright flash of lightning, startled the old man, prompting him to hurry home at a brisk pace. Taylor, momentarily stunned, blinked rapidly before letting out a deep sigh and slowly making her way home. The first heavy raindrops began to fall, quickly turning into a downpour. Streams of water cascaded down Taylor's hair and face, masking the tears that mixed with the rain. With each step towards her house, her tears flowed more freely. Pausing briefly at the doorstep, she exhaled deeply and stepped inside. "There she is," remarked a thin woman with a slightly slurred voice, her mood seemingly buoyed by alcohol. She eyed Taylor critically. "Did you finish cleaning the yard?" the woman asked sharply. "Almost done," Taylor replied curtly, quickly cleaned herself up, and retreated to her room. She changed into dry clothes and snuggled under her blanket, feeling the warmth envelop her. Her eyes gradually closed, and she drifted into sleep, undisturbed by the storm outside. In her dream, Taylor was back in her childhood, in the beautiful house by the river, surrounded by her parents when she was about 5 years old. Her father playfully tossed her into the air, evoking laughter, while her mother playfully chided him, her face alight with a smile. In her mother's hands was a tray of sandwiches, and Lilo, their cherished white Spitz, playfully darted around their feet. The dream shifted, and they were all in the car, Lilo included, driving through a blur of trees and fields. The wind caressed Taylor's face, bringing a smile to her lips. But then, abruptly, everything halted, and a voice pierced the calm. "Get the girl. She's still breathing." Taylor sat up in her bed, her heart pounding from the vividness of the dream, or perhaps from the thunder that continued to rage outside. It had been a decade since the tragic car accident that claimed the lives of her parents and Lilo, their beloved pet. Taylor, miraculously surviving after being thrown from the car, had become an orphan in an instant. Her parents had been prosperous, and initially, Taylor was taken in by guardians who seemed loving and caring. However, just a month after her parents' funeral, a shocking revelation came to light. All the money from her father's business accounts had mysteriously vanished. With the family assets seized by banks due to unpaid debts, Taylor's life took a drastic turn. From being a cherished daughter, she found herself in a simple orphanage, alone and confused. That was until Aunt Stella and Uncle Virgil appeared, proclaiming themselves her new family. As a 7-year-old, Taylor yearned for affection and care. But this new home offered neither. Her aunt and uncle's kindness was a facade, maintained only for the benefits they received for taking in an orphan. In this household, Taylor was reminded often to be thankful, despite receiving only harsh words and cold treatment. Whenever child welfare inspectors visited, her life would temporarily transform. She would be dressed in fine clothes, borrowed from her cousin Georgia, and showcased as a happy child in a loving family. Taylor was coerced into playing this part perfectly, as Aunt Stella threatened to send her back to the orphanage if she spoke out of turn. The reality was far from the image portrayed. Taylor lived in a cramped room, wore second-hand clothes, and endured bullying from Georgia, her cousin. As she grew older, her guardians increasingly burdened her with chores, expecting her to clean the house and help in the barn from a young age. Taylor's situation was a stark contrast to her earlier life, filled with love and joy. Her heart ached for the warmth and happiness of her past, now just a distant, unattainable memory. Despite the hardships, she clung to the small mercies in her life, fearing that speaking up might land her back in the harsher environment of the orphanage. Her tears, often shed in solitude, were the silent witnesses to her pain and resilience. A year had passed since Georgia left for her studies, and Taylor had hoped things at home would improve. She longed for her guardians to notice her more, maybe even to love her. But reality was harsh. Her guardians started drinking heavily, often going on long bingers. To escape this, Taylor would leave the house like she did today. "Why are you lying there, you nui sansa?" Aunt Stella looked into the room. "Go to the store," she demanded loudly. "But Aunt Stella, it's pouring outside," Taylor protested. "You won't melt in a bit of rain," Stella replied sharply, her stern gaze telling Taylor not to argue. In the past, her guardians had been physically harsh with her. Despite this, Taylor feared that a children's home might be even worse, so she always followed their orders. Even now, with the rain pouring and thunder rumbling, she headed to the nearest store. Then, something unexpected happened. Stella's younger brother, Walter, who had just gotten out of prison, arrived. He immediately noticed Taylor, now 16 and strikingly pretty with her big blue eyes, light wavy hair, and slim figure. One night, while Stella and Virgil were out cold from drinking, Walter crept into Taylor's room. She was reading a book when he silently closed the door and moved towards her. Taylor felt a mix of fear and disgust as his rough, tattooed fingers touched her shoulder. She screamed and fought back, managing to flee the room. Walter, angry, pursued her. In the kitchen, a barely coherent Stella only smiled vacantly. Virgil was passed out at the table. "Aunt Stella, please help!" Taylor pleaded in terror. Stella only responded with a hiccup and a dismissive wave. Taylor dashed out of the house, Walter close behind. Tripping at the gate, she fell to the ground, with the menacing figure of Walter towering over her. In that moment of dread, Taylor closed her eyes tightly. "Hey, stop! Don't touch her!" Taylor was startled by a voice she didn't recognize. A young man, out of breath, stood nearby, looking determined. Walter smirked with contempt. "Yeah? And what'll you do about it?" he sneered. The young man turned to Taylor. "Is he your dad?" "No," Taylor burst out. "I don't have parents. I'm living with guardians, and he's their relative. They're all drunk now." Suddenly, Walter lunged at the young man, who swiftly sidestepped and tripped him, sending him tumbling onto the grass. The young man quickly pinned Walter down. "Had enough yet?" Walter didn't respond, so the young man pressed his knee harder until Walter yelped, "Stop! It hurts!" As the young man let him up, Walter limped away, clutching his back. The young man introduced himself as Evan, then quickly turned his attention to Taylor. "You've got a nasty cut there. Do you have a first aid kit at home?" "I'm not going back," Taylor said firmly. "I'd rather sleep outside than return there." Evan agreed, especially wary of someone peering at them through a window. He suggested they go to his grandmother's house. "I'm staying with my grandma for the weekend," he explained. "I'll be here a few more days. Why do they treat you like that?" Taylor's voice was bitter. "I don't know, but I'm not going back. I'd rather be in a children's home than live like this." Tears welled up in her eyes. Evan comforted her, reassuring her with a gentle pat on the shoulder. "Don't worry. Everything will be okay." Taylor had been taken in by Stella for the financial support. Stella used Taylor's funds for her own daughter, Georgia, and continued to do so. As they walked together, Evan shared captivating stories and jokes, his smile making Taylor blush unknowingly. "You won't be hurt anymore," Evan reassured her, gently holding her hand. "I'm here now. I won't leave you." Taylor found a safe haven for the night at Evan's grandmother's house. It was a peaceful place, a stark contrast to the chaos she had known. The next morning, after a hearty breakfast and a lot of thought, Taylor and Evan agreed that the best option for her was to return to the children's home. With nowhere else to turn and her 18th birthday not too far away, Taylor realized she needed a stable environment to plan her next steps. Evan accompanied her to the children's home, ensuring she arrived safely. There, the staff welcomed her back with understanding and concern. Evan explained everything that had happened, and the authorities were informed. As a result, Stella faced legal consequences. She was fined for her negligence and lost the financial support she received for taking care of Taylor. At 16, this marked a significant turning point in Taylor's life. She was embarking on a new chapter, one filled with hope and possibilities. Taylor initially feared mistreatment at the children's home, but her experience there turned out to be unexpectedly positive. The home, a 2-story stone building nestled on the city's outskirts, offered a sanctuary to the once displaced girl. Having been abruptly uprooted from this city at the age of 5, everything about her return felt both novel and surreal. She would often find herself absorbed in the urban symphony of street noises and captivated by the lamplights casting their glow through her new bedroom windows. This marked the beginning of a fresh chapter in her life. Evan, who emerged as more than just a friend to Taylor, remained a silent yet significant presence in her life, a secret she cherished and kept to herself. As time whisked away, Taylor transitioned from a resident of the children's home to a proud graduate, fueled by a dream to emulate her mother's career as a clothing designer. Childhood memories of a toy sewing machine given by her mother now inspired her to enroll in a sewing college. During these transformative years, Evan's visits became a constant in Taylor's life, their friendship deepening with each encounter. Their bond grew especially strong on the day of Taylor's graduation from the children's home, a day they spent wandering and making unforgettable memories. Gradually, Evan's presence in Taylor's life intensified, their relationship evolving into something profound and undeniable. This change culminated one day after an exhilarating hike in the woods. A look exchanged, a moment lingered, and they shared their first passionate kiss, sealing a connection that had been silently growing. They spent the evening basking in the newfound intimacy of their relationship, walking in the park, sitting in a cafe, and driving around the city in Evan's car, each kiss deepening their realization that they had found something truly special in each other. 3 months later, Evan, unbothered by the difference in their social statuses, was keen to introduce Taylor to his parents. He was confident in their love, unshaken by materialistic boundaries, and never doubted his parents' acceptance. After all, they had always been his unwavering support system. In Taylor, Evan had found his unique and irreplaceable partner, and he was eager for his parents to meet the woman who had captured his heart. Taylor, upon learning of Evan's intention to introduce her to his parents, was fraught with nervous anticipation. Evan's parents were accomplished in their own right, having adeptly managed and invested the wealth passed down from their ancestors. Evan, sensing Taylor's apprehension, tried to reassure her with unwavering optimism. "My parents are incredible. It'll all work out. They might be initially surprised, but they'll come around," he comforted her. Taylor, however, couldn't shake off her apprehension, wondering aloud what would happen if they didn't approve. Evan's response was firm and supportive, emphasizing that regardless of his parents' reaction, their relationship would remain unaffected. The day of the meeting arrived on a crisp winter evening. As they drove to his parents' residence, Taylor was immediately struck by the resemblance of Evan's house to the one she remembered from her distant childhood. Though her recollections were hazy, the grandeur of the two-story house she once called home, with its expansive windows, quaint balcony, and shingled roof, was etched in her mind. Evan's house, while different, echoed those memories with its own display of affluence and grandeur. Approaching the porch, Taylor felt a familiar tightness in her chest. The landscape, adorned with meticulously arranged trees and bushes, evoked a sense of déjà vu. Inside, Evan's parents, Kimberly and Matthew, were eager yet unsuspecting. They anticipated meeting the girl their son was serious about, trusting Evan's judgment implicitly. They knew him to be intelligent and discerning in his choices. "He's been seeing her for a few months, but they've been friends for years," Kimberly remarked with excitement. However, they were unsure about her identity. Despite Evan's descriptions, her background remained a mystery to them. Kimberly speculated that it might be Ivanka, the banker Tony's daughter who lived nearby and was studying in London, a connection they found appealing. As they awaited the arrival, Kimberly and Matthew envisioned a future where their son's relationship would fortify their social and financial ties. Their conversation was filled with anticipation and a sense of pride in Evan's perceived acumen. However, the moment the doorbell rang and they caught sight of Taylor, their expression shifted. Kimberly's smile waned, and Matthew appeared visibly puzzled. The girl accompanying their son was not who they had envisioned, leaving them in a state of surprise and uncertainty. Taylor, feeling increasingly self-conscious, removed her plain down jacket and adjusted her modest dress. As she turned to face Evan's mother, Kimberly, she was met with an unwelcoming gaze that made her flinch. Evan, with an optimistic smile, introduced Taylor to his parents. "Mum, Dad, this is Taylor." Despite the formal introduction, the reception from Kimberly was lukewarm at best. "Well, come in, Taylor," Kimberly remarked with a hint of disdain, before turning away and leading the way to the dining table, where she took her seat with an air of superiority. Matthew followed silently, his expression reflecting a mix of curiosity and reservation. In the opulent dining room, adorned with crystal and mirrors, Taylor felt like an outsider. The lavishness of the setting was a stark reminder of a lifestyle she had long forgotten existed. Dinner commenced in an uncomfortable silence, with Evan attempting to initiate conversation. His efforts, however, were met with terse responses from his parents, who barely acknowledged Taylor's presence. Despite the cold atmosphere, Evan tried to reassure Taylor with a wink, silently communicating his support. When lobsters were served, Kimberly's eyes narrowed with curiosity, almost challenging Taylor to navigate this unfamiliar terrain. Taylor, who had little experience with such extravagant cuisine, struggled with the etiquette of eating lobster. Her seafood experience was limited to simpler fare like herring or pollock, staples in the children's home and foster care. Sensing her discomfort, Evan discreetly guided her, a gesture met with a derisive smirk from Kimberly. Breaking the tension, Kimberly addressed Taylor directly. "So, tell us about yourself, Taylor. We're very curious to know about your parents, where you live, or where you study." Evan's interjection to ease the situation was quickly dismissed by his mother, who insisted on knowing more about their guest, her tone suggesting suspicion and condescension. Taylor, her voice trembling and eyes brimming with tears, revealed her humble background. "I'm studying to be a seamstress. My parents died when I was 5. I grew up in a children's home." Kimberly's reaction to this revelation was one of shock and disdain. her question about Taylor's parents implying a prejudiced and insensitive judgment. Taylor, defending her family's honor, clarified, "My dad was a businessman. We also lived in a big, bright house much like yours. But after my parents' death, everything was taken from us." Her words painted a picture of a life once parallel to the luxury she now found herself in, yet tragically lost. Matthew's insensitive remark hung in the air. "So your father must not have been clean or something?" He immediately regretted his words, realizing he'd rather be conversing with a banker's daughter, someone like Ivanka, instead of Taylor. His eagerness to network with the financially elite was evident. "Dad!" Evan's voice cracked with shock. "That's too much. How can you say such things about someone you never even met?" "We speak our minds in this house," Kimberly responded sharply, her tone dripping with disdain. "I never imagined I'd be sharing a meal with an orphan seamstress. Our son certainly knows how to surprise us." The cruel words struck Taylor like a physical blow. She bolted from the table, her tears blurring the path to the exit. Her heart was heavy with humiliation, a feeling she had never known before. The scorn in Evan's parents' eyes, their mocking tone. It was all because she didn't symbolize wealth to them. Evan, torn between his parents and Taylor, hurried after her. Meanwhile, his parents nonchalantly continued their meal as if nothing had transpired. At the gates, Evan caught up to Taylor, gently grasping her shoulders. He pulled her into an embrace, trying to soothe her. Between sobs, Taylor questioned him repeatedly. "Why? Why did you bring me here?" Her voice was a mix of hurt and disbelief. "You said your parents were nice, but they were so cruel. I don't know why they behaved that way. I'm as shocked as you are," Evan replied, his voice filled with regret. "I always believed they were understanding and supportive. They never dictated my choices of friends or whom to socialize with. I never expected this." "You've never brought someone like me to your home before," Taylor remarked bitterly, her voice tinged with sadness. "Please don't say that," Evan implored, his heart heavy. "But isn't it the truth?" Taylor's question lingered unanswered in the air. Evan was at a loss for words. He could only drive Taylor back to her dorm, staying by her side until dawn. Throughout the night, he comforted her, professing his love and vowing that no obstacle would stand in their way. And in those tender moments, Taylor found herself believing him. Their relationship, once purely romantic, deepened that night into something more profound and intimate. Evan softly inquired, his arms wrapped tenderly around her. "Do you have any regrets?" "None," she replied with a gentle assurance. "Our love is strong. That's what matters most, isn't it?" "It is, and everything will fall into place. I'm sure even our parents will be enjoying themselves at our wedding someday," Evan said with optimism. "A wedding?" The thought made Taylor's heart skip in excitement. "Absolutely. We're in this for the long haul," Evan affirmed with a warm smile. "Let's focus on our education first. You finishing college, me becoming a doctor. Then we can think about marriage. Imagine you as the city's most renowned fashion designer." Taylor blushed slightly. "I've always dreamed of having a boy and a girl." "And so we shall," Evan agreed, their hearts entwined in dreams of a shared future. They spent the night wrapped in each other's embrace, envisioning their life ahead until sleep overtook them. The new year was a cozy affair in Evan's apartment, just the two of them creating their own world. After the holidays, Taylor moved in with Evan, trying to push aside thoughts of his parents' reaction. She held on to the hope that they would come to accept her. After all, Evan, with his kind and unassuming nature, was a stark contrast to his parents. Perhaps their initial meeting was just a misunderstanding. Time flew by. Taylor completed her studies and started working at a sewing factory, while Evan was on the brink of completing his medical degree. One warm July evening, as Taylor hummed a nursery rhyme while preparing dinner, Evan had gone out to meet his university friends, promising to return later. But just 20 minutes later, a knock at the door caught her off guard. "Evan's back already?" she wondered, rushing to the door without a glance through the peephole. Her smile faded instantly upon seeing the visitor. "Kimberly?" Taylor's voice wavered with surprise. "Hello?" "May I come in?" Kimberly asked, stepping inside without waiting for a reply, brushing past Taylor. "Yes, of course," Taylor responded, slightly taken aback. "I'm sorry, this is unexpected. Please, come in. I was just making pie." "Pie?" Kimberly's voice dripped with disdain. "No, thank you. I think you should be more careful with your diet. Though, in your case, it might not make much difference." Taylor's face clouded with confusion. "What do you mean?" "You're not going to keep my son with your peas or your looks," Kimberly said with a smirk. "Where is he?" "He's out with his university friends," Taylor replied, her voice steady. "With friends?" Kimberly's laughter was tinged with mockery, but her tone quickly turned cold and piercing. "He's actually with his true love right now." "No, he really is with his college friends," Taylor insisted, feeling a twinge of unease. Kimberly's laugh had a cruel edge. "You must think you're already my son's wife. Let me clarify something for you. Evan has been engaged to Ivanka for a long time. They were a couple in London, but then you came along. Simple, convenient, and here, while Ivanka was miles away. My son started this arrangement with you. He's a man, after all, and had his needs. I apologize for being so direct, but that's the harsh reality. Ivanka and Evan are at a cafe together as we speak. I thought I should inform you, spare you the humiliation of facing Evan directly. Poor boy, he just didn't know how to break it off with you more gracefully." Kimberly paused, her gaze sweeping the room disdainfully, before adding, "They're planning a wedding for August." After delivering this blow, she fixed her eyes on Taylor, challenging her to respond. Taylor's lips quivered, and her eyes brimmed with tears. "Please, leave my apartment," Taylor managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "Leave? This place was bought with my husband's money," Kimberly retorted with a smirk. "But I won't force you out immediately. Take your time to pack, but I expect you gone soon. I don't want to see you here again." With that, Kimberly turned and left the apartment, even offering a dismissive wave to Taylor as she departed. Taylor sat motionless for several minutes, her mind racing. Could Evan have been so deceitful? Had he merely used her? Compelled by a mix of hope and dread, Taylor found herself heading to the cafe. She clung to the faint hope that Kimberly's words were a fabrication, that Evan's love for her was genuine. Yet, as she peered through the cafe window, her heart sank. There sat Evan, with a stunningly beautiful girl she didn't recognize. Taylor watched as the girl animatedly chatted with Evan, her laughter echoing lightly in the cafe. Every so often, she would reach out, gently touching his hand, drawing Taylor's gaze. Evan seemed to be a passive participant, simply listening and nodding. Taylor tried to convince herself that this could be just a friend from college, but her heart felt heavy with doubt. As she was about to step into the cafe, the girl suddenly stood up, went around the table, and hugged Evan from behind. Then, as he turned towards her, she leaned in and kissed him. That sight shattered Taylor's last thread of hope. Her world felt as if it had imploded. Closing her eyes, she refused to witness any more. With a sharp turn, she fled from the cafe, her heart pounding in her ears. Back at the apartment, Taylor packed her belongings in a whirlwind of emotion. Disgust and heartbreak overwhelmed her. She left behind everything Evan had given her: jewelry, gifts, even the phone he had presented on her birthday. The keys to the apartment were left on the stand as a final gesture. She couldn't bear to take anything that reminded her of him. Work was the last place Taylor wanted to be, as everything there echoed Evan's betrayal. The evening was drawing in, and she found herself adrift, with nowhere to go. Having just started her job, she hadn't even received her first paycheck yet. Returning to her uncle and aunt's home was not an option she was willing to consider. With a sense of desperate resolve, Taylor made her way to the train station. With the little money she had, she purchased a ticket to the furthest destination she could afford and boarded the train. Settling into her seat, she closed her eyes, seeking refuge in the darkness behind her eyelids. She was awakened by the hustle and bustle of another train station, with new passengers embarking. Realizing she had arrived at a small town, Taylor peered out the window. The sight of beautiful forest scenery greeted her, offering a glimpse of serenity amidst her turmoil. Feeling a sudden connection to this unfamiliar place, Taylor decided to disembark. She stepped off the train, her heart open to the possibilities of this new, unknown destination. Taylor settled on a bench outside the quaint train station, her thoughts a whirlwind of emotions. In the distance, she noticed a young family strolling by, their laughter reaching her ears as they guided their toddler between them. It was a scene of simple joy, a stark contrast to her own turmoil. Drawing out a well-worn family photograph, Taylor studied the faces of her parents and her younger self, a mere 3-year-old at the time. A smile touched her lips, not one of sorrow, but of recognition. She had pored over this photo countless times, each viewing accompanied by tears. Now it sparked a different reaction, a sense of purpose and resolve. She was Taylor, determined to carve out her own path just as her mother had done. She refused to be a victim of circumstances, seeking shelter or handouts. It was time to take action. Her attention was drawn to a discarded newspaper on a nearby bench. Picking it up, she quickly scanned the ads, and her eyes caught an announcement. A company was hiring seamstresses. It was an opportunity, and she seized it without hesitation. Upon starting her new job, Taylor realized it wasn't as ideal as the advertisement had suggested. The pay was modest, but they provided housing, which was a relief. Her roommate wasn't a young girl, but a seemingly fragile woman named Jezebel. However, appearances were deceiving. Jezebel, originally from the Philippines, had come to this country to support her 2 children back home. Through their conversations, Taylor came to admire Jezebel's resilience and strength. She was small in stature, but had a heart vast enough to encompass oceans of endurance and love. Initially, Taylor had resolved to keep her past, particularly Evan's betrayal, a secret. But confiding in Jezebel proved cathartic, a release she hadn't known she needed. "Taylor, never trust them," Jezebel cautioned, her voice laced with the wisdom of experience. "They only want one thing, and you know what it is." Taylor merely nodded in agreement. Her experiences had already taught her that painful lesson. As a seamstress in the bustling factory, Taylor worked with diligence and precision, her hands moving skillfully over the fabrics. Each stitch was not just part of her job, but a step towards rebuilding her life, a life where she was the architect of her own destiny. As the days passed, Taylor began to experience unsettling symptoms. She felt dizzy more often, and mornings brought waves of nausea that left her feeling drained. Her roommate, Jezebel, with her keen sense of observation, quickly noticed that something was amiss. One particularly humid afternoon, amidst the rhythmic hum of sewing machines, Jezebel cast a worried glance at Taylor. "Taylor, are you all right? You've seemed a bit off lately," she asked, her voice competing with the factory's noise. Taylor looked up, momentarily halting her work. "Off? In what way?" she inquired, a hint of confusion lacing her words. Jezebel hesitated, choosing her words with care. "Well, you seem to have a fuller face these days, and your appetite, it's increased noticeably," she observed, her eyes conveying concern. Taylor let out a nervous chuckle, attempting to dismiss the observation. "It's probably all those chocolate chip cookies from the vending machine. They're my guilty pleasure." But Jezebel wasn't easily swayed. She had seen similar signs before and voiced her suspicion. "Taylor, I think you might be pregnant," she stated, her tone mixing worry with empathy. "Pregnant?" The word seemed to echo in Taylor's mind, her initial amusement fading into disbelief. "No, that can't be right. Maybe I've just gained a little weight, that's all." Jezebel placed a gentle hand on Taylor's shoulder, her expression soft yet earnest. "It's best to know for sure. Why not see a doctor, just to be certain?" With some reluctance, Taylor took her advice. The next week, she visited a local clinic, her heart heavy with uncertainty. The doctor, a compassionate woman, conducted the necessary tests and confirmed Jezebel's suspicion. Taylor was indeed pregnant. As the doctor outlined Taylor's options, including the possibility of termination, a storm of emotions raged within Taylor. She was overwhelmed with shock, fear, and a sense of disbelief. Yet, amidst this emotional chaos, a decisive resolve emerged. Her eyes, clear and resolute, met the doctor's gaze. "No," Taylor stated firmly. "I'm going to keep the baby." From that moment, Taylor never wavered in her decision. She resolved to raise her child alone, without seeking anything from Evan. He would remain unaware, a chapter closed in her life as she embarked on a new journey as a mother. When Taylor's pregnancy became known at the factory, the management's reaction was less than supportive. They informed her that, according to company policy, leaving within the first 6 months of employment meant forfeiting any bonuses. This was a significant concern for Taylor, who was relying on every bit of financial support she could get. Determined, Taylor decided to continue working up until her maternity leave. She hoped to save as much money as possible for the upcoming challenges of single motherhood. Jezebel, ever the faithful friend, took the day off to pick Taylor and the newborn up from the maternity hospital. She arrived with balloons and gifts, her face beaming with happiness. The journey home was filled with Jezebel's caring advice on everything from how to properly hold the baby's head to dietary tips for a new mother. "Taylor, she looks just like you," Jezebel observed with a gentle smile. "What are you going to name her?" "Dorothy," Taylor replied softly, her voice filled with love. "It means a gift from God." "That's a beautiful name," Jezebel agreed, her smile widening. "She's going to have a wonderful life." The first month of motherhood for Taylor passed with relative calm, thanks in large part to Jezebel's extraordinary support. Jezebel had assured Taylor not to worry about finances, promising to help out with her own salary. Although Taylor felt uncomfortable accepting such generosity, she recognized that she had little choice in her current situation. Jezebel's kindness and humanity, despite her own life's hardships, deeply touched Taylor. "I'll repay you, Jezebel," Taylor promised gratefully. "As soon as I'm back at work, I'll settle everything with you." Fortunately, her pregnancy progressed smoothly. Taylor was diligent about her health, attending regular checkups and adhering closely to her doctor's advice. Despite the recommendation to start her maternity leave at 30 weeks, she chose to work longer to accumulate additional savings. Each night, as she fell asleep, Taylor would gently stroke her growing belly and whisper reassuring words to her unborn child. "My little girl, everything will be all right. Mum will take care of everything." In response, the baby would often kick softly, as if in understanding. Throughout this journey, Jezebel was a pillar of support for Taylor. She took on a role akin to a personal caregiver, constantly reassuring her that they would manage fine once the baby arrived. Taylor was immensely grateful for Jezebel's unwavering support and friendship. Labor began unexpectedly at the factory. Jezebel was right there, assisting Taylor to the entrance, where an ambulance was waiting. The concern in Jezebel's eyes was evident, reflecting the worry of everyone at the factory. After a long, grueling labor, Taylor's efforts culminated in the overwhelming moment when she held her daughter against her chest. "My darling," she whispered through tears of joy. "We've finally met. Everything will be all right. Mum will do her best." Jezebel, with a warm smile, dismissed her concerns. "Don't worry about it," she reassured. Taylor couldn't help but express her gratitude again. "Jezebel, I know it's tough for you too, especially with your own kids back home. And yet, you're here helping me." "Who else is going to help you?" Jezebel responded with a shrug, highlighting the reality of their situation. Taylor was immensely thankful for Jezebel's selflessness, unaware that her roommate had sacrificed the money she had saved for Christmas gifts and clothes for her sons back in the Philippines. Jezebel knew her sons would understand her decision to support Taylor in her time of need. Initially, Taylor tried to balance work and caring for baby Dorothy, who slept in a crib in the corner. However, she soon noticed frowns and stares from her co-workers. While Dorothy's cries were initially tolerable, they gradually began to disrupt the work environment. Some employees even complained, suggesting Taylor should stay home with her baby. But leaving her job wasn't an option for Taylor, as the factory provided her with much-needed housing. The situation came to a head when the factory manager summoned Taylor. She was given a week to resolve her childcare issues and was warned that her presence was becoming a disruption. The manager also inquired about Jezebel's involvement. Taylor, not wanting to implicate her friend, was cautious in her response. However, the manager hinted that Jezebel's job was also at risk due to the frequent breaks they both took to care for Dorothy. The management had noticed their divided attention, and with many others eager to work, Taylor and Jezebel's positions were in jeopardy. Taylor, understanding the gravity of the situation, agreed to leave the factory but pleaded with the manager to retain Jezebel. The manager, showing a glimmer of compassion, agreed to give Jezebel another chance. With a heavy heart, Taylor collected her final paycheck and departed, facing the uncertainty of the future. With the modest sum she had, Taylor found a cheap place to rent and moved in. She slowly began to establish herself as a home-based seamstress. She managed to acquire an old sewing machine, sourced some fabrics, and started accepting her first orders. Although this venture brought in a steady, albeit modest, income, it was hardly enough for substantial growth. Meanwhile, Dorothy continued to grow and develop alongside her mother's budding business. One day, after completing a particularly lucrative order, Taylor decided to celebrate. She wanted to share her small success with Jezebel and went to the factory to invite her. However, upon arrival, she was shocked to learn that Jezebel had been fired a few days earlier. An employee explained that Jezebel was considered too old and too slow for the work. Taylor knew that without any savings, as Jezebel sent most of her earnings back home, she would likely have to seek shelter. Rushing home, anxious to help her friend, Taylor was surprised to find a strange car parked outside her small mobile home. A man in a suit was knocking on her door. "Excuse me, sir. Can I help you?" Taylor asked with concern. "Taylor Harden?" the man inquired. "Yes, that's me. How can I assist you?" Taylor replied, her anxiety palpable. The man's face broke into a wide smile. "Hello, Taylor. Look at you all grown up," he exclaimed. Confused, Taylor cautiously asked, "Do I know you, sir?" "Oh, my apologies for not introducing myself. I'm Harold O'Brien, a lawyer," he explained. Taylor stood there, more baffled than before. She had no idea why a lawyer would be seeking her out. "You're making me nervous, sir," Taylor admitted, her voice tinged with worry. "Don't be alarmed, it's actually good news. I was your father's attorney," Harold revealed, his tone reassuring. Seated in Taylor's modest home, Harold O'Brien, a middle-aged lawyer with a pleasant demeanour, began to unravel a story that seemed almost unbelievable to Taylor. Over cups of coffee, he revealed a past that connected directly to her. "You are the heir to your father's company and its assets," Harold explained. "An heir?" Taylor echoed in disbelief. "But my parents, they passed away when I was very young." Harold nodded solemnly. "Yes, that's true. At the time of their passing, your father's business partner, Nicholas Ellison, was in charge of the company. Unfortunately, he was involved in illegal activities, including money laundering. He orchestrated the car accident that claimed your parents' lives and left you orphaned. After that, he seized control of your father's assets." Taylor felt tears sting her eyes as painful memories surfaced. "How did you find out about all this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "The investigation was lengthy and complicated. Eventually, when confronted with irrefutable evidence, Nicholas confessed to his crimes," Harold replied. "Finding you wasn't easy. You've moved around quite a bit, but as your father's only surviving relative, you are entitled to everything he left behind." Struggling to process this information, Taylor asked, "What does that mean for me?" "It means you have the legal right to claim your inheritance," Harold stated matter-of-factly. He then showed her documents detailing the value of the assets. Taylor's eyes widened in shock as she scanned the figures. It was hard for her to believe that this fortune was rightfully hers, and she regarded Harold with a hint of skepticism. "And you'll take a cut of this if I sign, right?" she asked cautiously. Harold chuckled, shaking his head. "No, you get to keep everything. It's all yours to do with as you please." "But what's in it for you?" Taylor persisted. "Why are you doing this?" Harold's expression softened as he reminisced. "Many years ago, I was a struggling student, desperately needing a job to survive. Your father's company had an opening. There were more qualified candidates, but for some reason, your father chose me. He gave me a chance when no one else would. Helping you now is my way of honoring his memory." As Harold concluded his story, Taylor sat in stunned silence, absorbing the magnitude of this unexpected turn in her life's journey. Harold's connection to Taylor's family ran deep. After being hired by her father, he had become intricately involved in the company's affairs, eventually gravitating towards the legal aspects. This experience led him to establish his own law firm. When Taylor's parents tragically died, it hit Harold hard. He had viewed Taylor's father as a mentor and a father figure, driving him to seek justice for their untimely deaths. Taylor listened, utterly captivated by the narrative unfolding before her. As she delved into her own memories, recalling fragments of her parents and the challenges she had faced, a wave of emotion overtook her. Tears streamed down her face as she grappled with the revelations. Sensing her distress, Harold moved beside her, offering a comforting embrace. In the midst of processing this life-altering news, Taylor asked Harold to pause the proceedings. She needed time to think, to plan what she would do with her newfound fortune. A month later, Taylor stood proudly in front of a small sewing company she had just purchased. It was a tangible manifestation of her dreams, a symbol of the new life she was about to embark on. She had one more request for Harold. A few days later, they were outside a large sewing factory, the same one where Jezebel had found work after being fired from their previous job. Harold had discovered that Jezebel had struggled significantly, bouncing between shelters before landing this job. Taylor waited outside the factory, a bouquet of flowers in hand, as little Dorothy slept in the back seat of her car. Inside, Jezebel was being misled by her manager into thinking she was being fired again. She emerged from the building, her expression fraught with worry, scanning the area for the person who had requested her. In a moment filled with anticipation, Taylor stood outside the sewing factory, bouquet in hand, partially concealing her face. As Jezebel emerged, looking around bewildered, Taylor couldn't contain her excitement any longer. "Surprise!" she shouted joyfully. Jezebel's expression transformed from confusion to delight as she recognized Taylor. "Taylor! Is that really you? How have you been?" she exclaimed, rushing forward to embrace her friend. The surprise and genuine happiness on Jezebel's face were evident. "I've missed you so much, Jezebel," Taylor said, handing her the bouquet, which took Jezebel by surprise. Jezebel was about to explain her absence, but Taylor, brimming with excitement, didn't give her the chance. "It doesn't matter now. I have something incredible to show you," she said, leading Jezebel to her car. After a short drive, they arrived at a building proudly displaying a sign that read, "Taylor's." Jezebel's reaction was one of utter astonishment as she gaped at the sign. Inside, Taylor revealed a spacious area filled with brand new sewing machines, all ready for operation. "How do you like it?" she asked Jezebel, who was still trying to take it all in. "It's amazing, Taylor. I'm so proud of you," Jezebel managed to say, her voice filled with emotion. Then Taylor looked deeply into Jezebel's eyes and smiled. "Jezebel, I hope you don't mind, but I've appointed you as the manager here," she announced. Jezebel's initial confusion quickly turned to overwhelming emotion, and she had to sit down, asking for a glass of water. As Taylor brought her the water, she revealed yet another surprise. Harold, the lawyer, was assisting in bringing Jezebel's teenage sons from the Philippines so they could be reunited with their mother. "You gave up everything to help me, Jezebel, even living in shelters. Your heart is pure and enormous. I can never thank you enough." Taylor expressed her gratitude, her voice thick with emotion. She then shared the entire story of how she became the heir to a fortune, unfolding the dramatic turn of events that had led to this moment. 6 years had passed since Taylor established her clothing brand, which had grown into a highly successful venture. Specializing in exclusive, high-end fashion, she catered to a clientele that appreciated luxury and style. Her brand had flourished, with multiple stores across the city and plans for further expansion. Jezebel, now an integral part of the business, worked tirelessly as the manager, overseeing most of the operations. Little Dorothy, always by her mother's side, was a familiar presence at fashion shows, presentations, and exhibitions. Taylor believed in exposing her daughter to the world of fashion and creativity from a young age. In addition to these experiences, Dorothy received education from private tutors at home, ensuring a well-rounded upbringing. Their lives had transformed remarkably, a testament to their resilience and hard work. During a new line presentation at a high-end hotel venue, after Jezebel's introductory speech, Taylor took the stage. Dressed elegantly, she began to speak about her brand and the new collection. The audience waited in anticipation for the models to start their walk. Suddenly, the event was interrupted by the sound of a door slamming. A man in a suit approached Taylor on stage and whispered urgently in her ear. Taylor's expression shifted instantly. Something was wrong. She excused herself and hurried off stage, leaving Jezebel to continue the presentation. The emergency involved Dorothy. The little girl had wandered off into a different hall, hosting a conference and, during a coffee break, had inadvertently consumed something she was allergic to. Taylor was unaware of the full extent of the situation as she rushed through the long, seemingly endless hallway. The corridor felt as if it was stretching before her, each step filled with anxiety and fear of the unknown. These were agonizing moments for Taylor, filled with dread about what she might find when she reached her daughter. As Taylor burst into the crowded venue, her heart racing with fear, she saw a circle of people huddled around a small figure on the ground. It was Dorothy, lying there with a man kneeling beside her. Taylor's initial panic gave way to relief when she saw Dorothy smiling, but tears still streamed down her face as she rushed to her daughter's side. "Oh, baby, are you okay? I'm so sorry," Taylor exclaimed, enveloping Dorothy in a protective hug. The man, still focused on his medical kit, began to explain without looking up. "Your daughter had an allergic reaction to something she ate here. It's important to identify the allergen and keep the necessary medication with you," he advised calmly. "I've given her an antihistamine. She's fine now, but you'll need to follow up with the doctor about her allergies." As Taylor, still teary-eyed, glanced at the man collecting his instruments, she hadn't seen his face yet. Her heart was filled with gratitude towards this stranger. "Thank you so much, sir. I can't thank you enough for helping my daughter," she said, her voice choked with emotion. Then, as the man packed away his kit and looked up, Taylor's heart skipped a beat. A gasp, almost a scream, escaped her lips. The man initially didn't recognize Taylor through her tear-streaked makeup, but she recognized him immediately. It was Evan, the man who had once caused her immense pain and heartbreak, the man she had learned to despise, and now the same man who had just saved their daughter. Their eyes locked in a moment of intense recognition. "Taylor? Is that really you, Taylor?" "Oh my God!" Evan exclaimed, his expression transforming into a smile of disbelief and joy. But Taylor's reaction was far from joyful. Her face hardened with a mix of anger and shock. As she began to lift Dorothy up, Evan suggested letting her rest a bit longer. Taylor hesitated, her hand on her forehead, lost in a whirlwind of emotions. The past and present collided in that moment, leaving her speechless and conflicted. "I've been searching for you, Taylor. Why did you disappear?" Evan implored, his eyes reflecting a deep sense of pain and fatigue. It emerged that Evan had realized his dream of becoming a heart surgeon. He was now a successful practitioner in a prestigious clinic. "What choice did I have?" Taylor retorted. "Your mother told me about your engagement, and then I saw you with that woman at the cafe." Evan's expression grew more pained. "Oh, Taylor, you should have waited for me to explain," he said. He shared that the encounter with Ivanka was orchestrated by his mother, describing how Ivanka had acted unusually, initiating hugs and kisses. Taylor, however, struggled to accept his explanation, recalling how Evan had seemed to reciprocate Ivanka's affections. Evan continued, insisting that he had never succumbed to his parents' wishes for him to marry Ivanka. He had remained unmarried, always hoping Taylor would return. For Taylor, though, these revelations belonged to a distant past. She observed Evan's gaze lingering on Dorothy, now asleep, and realized he must be thinking she had moved on and started a new family. "I'm truly happy for you, Taylor," Evan said sincerely, his eyes conveying honesty. As they parted that day, Taylor expressed her gratitude for his help and acknowledged his success. Before leaving, Evan asked if they could meet again in a less formal setting to fully explain everything, but Taylor, still harboring resentment towards his parents and their past, asked Evan to move on and leave her be. That day, Evan left without another word, respecting her wishes. Evan sensed Taylor's lingering anger, but also recognized a faint hope in her willingness to exchange business cards. This small gesture offered a glimmer of possibility that she might be open to reconnecting in the future. A few days later, Evan reached out to Taylor, inviting her to dinner. She declined, citing business commitments as her reason. Undeterred, Evan continued to make attempts, sending texts and trying to initiate contact. For the next 2 weeks, Taylor found herself in an emotional turmoil. Her heart ached, not for Evan, but for the painful reality that he was unaware of his own daughter's existence. In these moments of confusion and heartache, Taylor sought counsel from Jezebel, whose wisdom and perspective had always guided her rightly. Jezebel's insights often illuminated aspects that Taylor overlooked, perhaps due to her lesser life experience. After much reflection and discussion with Jezebel, Taylor decided to give Evan an opportunity to meet his daughter. By this time, Evan had ceased his calls and messages. Jezebel reminded Taylor, "A man often finds himself torn between two sides. Evan was caught between pleasing you and his parents. But don't forget, he did protect you from your drunk uncle once and stood by you during tough times." They arranged to meet at a cozy restaurant. Jezebel and Dorothy arrived early, while Evan offered to pick up Taylor. She agreed to this arrangement. During the drive to the restaurant, both Evan and Taylor remained mostly silent. Evan expressed his gratitude for the opportunity to explain himself, but Taylor gently rebuffed him, indicating that she didn't need any explanations. Her intention was for him to meet someone very special, their daughter, Dorothy. Entering the restaurant, Taylor led Evan to the table where Dorothy and Jezebel were sitting. With a warm smile, she introduced Jezebel to Evan. Then, turning to Dorothy, her expression softened. "This is Dorothy," Taylor said, pausing for a moment as she gathered her emotions. "Remember the doctor who saved your life?" Dorothy smiled in recognition and nodded. "His name is Evan, and he's your dad," Taylor revealed, her voice trembling and eyes filling with tears. Jezebel, too, was visibly moved by the moment. Evan's expression was one of utter shock and confusion. His gaze shifted from Dorothy to Taylor and back as he grappled with the reality unfolding before him. Seeing Taylor's tearful nod, the truth dawned on him. "This is our daughter, Evan," Taylor affirmed through her tears. As she spoke, Taylor reflected on her own actions. She realized that her departure, prompted by a misunderstanding and anger towards Evan's parents, had also been a mistake. She acknowledged that keeping Evan unaware of his daughter was wrong, despite her justification rooted in past grievances. Evan, overwhelmed with emotion, looked at Dorothy with a mixture of awe and love. He couldn't believe he hadn't recognized his own daughter during their first encounter. Gently, he began to engage Dorothy in conversation, asking her questions with tenderness. Watching them interact, something shifted in Taylor's heart. For the first time since leaving Evan's apartment years ago, she felt a warmth towards him rekindle. Gradually, Taylor allowed Evan to become more involved in their lives, recognizing his importance as Dorothy's father. Moreover, Evan's attentiveness towards Taylor began to stir deeper emotions within her. One day, Evan invited Taylor on a drive, leading them to the small town of her childhood, a place fraught with difficult memories. Initially apprehensive, Taylor relaxed when Evan assured her they wouldn't be visiting her uncle and aunt. Instead, they were going to meet his grandmother, Amy, adding another layer to their unfolding story. Amy, Evan's grandmother, had a fondness for her garden, preferring the tranquility of her backyard to the hassle of driving around. As Taylor and Evan arrived at her modest home, they found Amy tending to her flowers, a hobby she cherished. Upon seeing Taylor and Evan approach, Amy greeted them with a warm smile. They settled outside in the sunshine, sipping tea and enjoying the serene atmosphere. Amy observed Taylor, noting her success and the parallels between her and her own father. There was a sense of pride and warmth in seeing someone else follow a path similar to her father's, one marked by resilience and triumph over adversity. During their conversation, Amy set down her cup and shared her knowledge of Taylor's story. She had learned from Evan how his parents had mistreated Taylor for being an orphan. This narrative resonated with Amy as it mirrored the stories her father, who had also grown up an orphan, had told her. He had overcome numerous challenges to become a prosperous businessman, eventually amassing significant wealth, which he left to Amy upon his passing. Amy revealed that after learning about Taylor's departure due to Evan's mother's actions, she had dismissed her own children from managing the family fortune. They now led humbler lives, with regular jobs and everyday concerns. Evan, still harboring resentment towards his parents, seldom communicated with them. Hearing Amy's story, Taylor's respect for her grew immensely. She looked at Evan, seeing him in a new light, her perception of him gradually shifting. On their way back, they stopped at a roadside market. Prompted by Taylor, Evan bought a box of fresh farm apples, placing it carefully in the trunk of the car. As they drove on, Taylor experienced a profound sense of transformation. She began to acknowledge Evan's enduring care and possible love for her. The passing scenery seemed to mirror her inner journey, one that had been tumultuous yet ultimately fulfilling. She felt at peace with her life's trajectory, appreciating every hardship and joy that had shaped her path. Evan stopped his car in front of Taylor's house. After she stepped out and walked towards the front door, Evan lingered by his car, seemingly in no rush to leave. Taylor, upon reaching her doorstep, turned back and noticed Evan still standing there. "Why are you just standing there?" she called out, a playful smile on her lips. "Don't forget the apples." Caught up in his thoughts, Evan had indeed forgotten about the box of farm apples. With a grin, he retrieved the box from the trunk and hurried inside. This small, shared moment marked Taylor's unspoken acceptance of Evan back into her life. There was much for Evan and Dorothy to catch up on, and Evan proved to be a devoted and affectionate father. He took a month's leave from his demanding role at the clinic to dedicate time to his newly reunited family. Jezebel had become a maternal figure for Taylor over the years, with Dorothy affectionately calling her Grandma Jess. Jezebel's own sons were thriving, pursuing their education at prestigious universities. For Dorothy's 7th birthday, Taylor had planned something truly special. She prepared a delicious dinner, with Jezebel contributing a beautifully baked birthday cake. As the evening's preparations were underway, the doorbell rang. "Keep setting the table, everyone. I'll get the door," Taylor announced, bounding towards the entrance. Upon opening the door, Taylor greeted the guests warmly. Evan, who was also present, was taken aback when he saw who the visitors were. Standing there were his parents, Matthew and Kimberly. Evan's reaction was one of utter surprise. his jaw nearly dropping at the sight of them. 5 long years had elapsed since Evan last spoke to his parents. Unknown to him, Taylor had taken the initiative to reach out to Kimberly, his mother. What she discovered was a changed woman, far removed from the arrogant demeanor she remembered. Kimberly was now working a regular day job, a stark contrast to her previous lifestyle. During their conversation, Taylor shared the entirety of her journey, leaving no detail untouched. It was a candid, heartfelt exchange that allowed Kimberly to see the consequences of her past actions. Moved by Taylor's story and her generosity of spirit, Kimberly listened with a mix of regret and newfound respect. In a gesture of reconciliation and healing, Taylor extended an invitation to Kimberly and Matthew to meet their granddaughter, Dorothy. She believed it was important for Dorothy to know her grandparents, especially now that they had seemingly turned over a new leaf. This was more than just a reunion. It was an opportunity for everyone to move beyond the past and build new relationships. As Matthew and Kimberly stood at the doorstep, the moment was laden with a mix of emotions. Evan, initially shocked, slowly began to process the possibility of mending bridges with his parents. Taylor watched this unfold, a quiet sense of accomplishment in her heart for facilitating this moment. Inside, the birthday celebration was a blend of joy and tentative reconciliation. Dorothy, unaware of the complex histories, was delighted to meet her grandparents. Jezebel, observing from a distance, smiled knowingly, appreciating the efforts to mend old wounds and bring the family together. Evan's parents, humbled by life's twists and turns, interacted with their granddaughter and Taylor with a newfound gentleness and gratitude. Evan, witnessing this change, felt a mix of relief and hope. As the evening drew to a close, the house was filled with laughter, conversations, and the promise of a fresh start. Taylor, looking around at the faces of her loved ones and those who had become part of her extended family, felt a profound sense of peace. The journey had been long and arduous, but it had led to this moment of unity and understanding. In this new chapter of their lives, the past grievances slowly faded into the background, giving way to a future where forgiveness and love reigned. Taylor, Evan, Dorothy, Jezebel, and Evan's parents, they all stood at the threshold of a new beginning, one where the bonds of family, both old and new, were cherished